Hello, everyone. Am I live? Good. Welcome, everybody. What do we have? 103. Should we give another minute or two for people being able to join, and then let's get into it. Okay. I just heard that about everyone who registered is here, so let's get into it. Welcome, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. It is a beautiful Sunday, a little bit grayish now, but thanks for taking the time. Let's look at the agenda. So I wanted to make this a pretty informal meeting compared to the annual meeting that we're going to have next month, and just give you a short presentation of the topics that are listed here, and then leave ample time for questions. If there are not many questions, it might be a pretty short meeting, but I want, with open microphones, that people can raise concerns, approval of the decisions that are in here and that we are leaning towards. I also want to say that we do this early. The annual meeting is a month out, but the parish board will not vote on a budget for another 2 or 3 weeks. So the idea here is that we really want to listen, right? That this is what the finance committee comes up with for the next year. And we want to make sure that we hear you if there are any, disagreements or something, that we still have time to work on the budget. This is why we do this so much in advance of the annual meeting, even though it means that some of the numbers are not final. So I'm going to speak briefly about this year, where we are today. Then I'm going to talk about the next fiscal year, the budget that we start planning for the next year. And then just have a few remarks at the end about, what we should look out for in the future from a financial perspective. So I'm talking a lot about the financial aspects and don't always point it out, but of course, this is what this meeting is about. So let's start. Where are we today? For the fiscal year 2022, which will end this summer, June 30th, here are some of the high and the low lights. When we planned this, we didn't even know. We thought Delta is an airline and Omicron a Greek letter, and that was May last year or something, or April. So we expected a full in-person church year, right? As we all know, this didn't happen. That also meant we cannot run the auction, which is a major budget contributor. And we had a few unexpected expenses. One was for mold remediation, because the buildings were not used for so long that they grew mold. And we had to buy simulcast equipment so we could, better use the multiple rooms in the church for the service, and also in the future stream the services in the internet to have this dual digital and in-person thing going on. These were some of the big, let's say, negative points in the terms of expenses. A plus point was that we had an unexpectedly last year pledges fulfillment. What that means is that usually not all pledges come in during the financial year they are meant to, but they come in late, and then we count them in the next year as late pledges. This is usually $5,000–6,000. This year it was $40,000, and the reason is that COVID scrambled all the schedules, and people, just paid late. I mean, we all lost our habits, and that was part of the reason. And part of the reason was also that, that we had a lot of people that really wanted to make sure that the church is not suffering in this, and had a lot of support. So that was a positive surprise. And also positive is that the fulfillment rates in the capital campaign are still high. We are still collecting there. It's still not finished. But still, we didn't see any dip or something like that. So these are the numbers, and I'm going to go through most of them in detail. So what you can see is the budgeted, we expect that the budgeted pledge donations will come in roughly. The prior year pledges, this is what I spoke about. We have $40,000 more than we anticipated. We have in the offering income, we have less, even though not, even though the number is still better than we could hope with a church being closed for half a year, right? So people are very generous in their offering. The rental income we predicted correctly because it was just the Johnson House and the summer camps that were running last summer. But the big negative number here is then the income from the fundraisers, which is largely the auction and the little bit that we planned for the musical. I know we will have a musical. Right now, we don't expect it's a big money maker, so we assume it to be a a zero thing, and of course we take it if anything comes in there. It's not going to be the nearly $10,000 we had with the big musicals with the 4 shows and sold out houses. Investment and interest income on the investment side, we fulfilled the predictions. Where we lost a little bit of money is in interest. The fixed interest rates, as you know, were pretty down until they were very recently raised, and so we lost a little bit there. That's where this comes from. And other operating income is basically not really plannable. So you can see the total income, even though we had this major shortfall from the rental income, this prior year pledges, the generosity of the congregation made up for that to a large part, and we are only $4,000 in the negative. On the expenses side, we had higher costs in personnel, but that was predicted. It was just predicted in a different row here, because the $7,000 was the additional money that we give Rianne in order to help us with our digital offerings. And that was planned under administrative costs, because back then we thought it would be more of a service offering that we buy before we switch to a plan to have basically add that to Rianne's hours. So the 7,000 were planned, but the administrative number should then be at 50,700 and not at 56,000. And this is where the mold remediation came in. So this is additional cost that we didn't expect. And the next line, the simulcast equipment. So these two together, the $6,000 roughly from the mold remediation and the simulcast equipment, these were unexpected expenses. Buildings and ground, we expected to come in as predicted. Debt service as well. Not much surprise on the rest. Utilities, gas prices are skyrocketing. That already hits us this year and will hit us a little bit more next year. We paid the anticipated UUA donations. The committees stayed well under budget because they were just not as active as a full in-person year would have made them be. So this is where we had some savings. Yes, and the rest, music committee, everything else came in as expected. We didn't have to lay back $2,000 for Chris's sabbatical because he has different sabbatical plans. This is where we can save another $2,000. So roughly we came out with $5,000 additional cost, which adds with a less income to an overall result somewhere around $9,000. I think that is actually pretty positive given what happened and the difference that we had in our planning assumptions. And our stabilization fund that we accumulated over the years for unexpected cost can easily cover that and still is very healthy after this year, right? So it's not that we have to go to any deplete this fully or something like that. It is within the realm what we planned for when we set up the stabilization fund. So it's not, it's not a super positive year, but I think the generosity is high. That what we see that helped us, and we managed, cost and expenses to be not as dramatic. Yeah, so if we look now on this pandemic years overall from a financial perspective, I put a little bit of a celebratory icon there because I think compared to other churches, we were able to continuously employ all of our staff and even raise their salaries. We have a major update in our HVAC system for having a healthier church. We were able to invest some in digital offerings, and the financial support has not declined from our friends and members. So, I mean, these are all terrific news. And I know that Chris knows a lot of his colleagues that, where the congregations are in much worse situations like that. So I do think overall, the pandemic years have been, from a financial perspective, much less extreme to us due to the unwavering support of the people and due to also the timing of the capital campaign, which of course helped us a great deal with the HVAC system, right? So these things together, the overall generosity allowed us to really, survive these, have our wonderful stuff rightfully paid, and still have a stabilization fund if the next year brings more surprises. So how does the next fiscal year look like? Let's get into it. Let's start with, the newest stewardship picture, the pledge drive for next year. So as you can see here on the top row, the pledge dollars that we are at are much higher than before of May 13. However, I want to caution a little bit there, because what happened in the pledge drive is that early in the pledge drive, we were well behind our numbers from previous years. So what we did, we got somewhat nervous and we increased, the stewardship committee and Chris together, they increased the communication, reached out to a lot of people earlier than in past years. And so in short, we are not so sure whether, you can now expect that this higher result at this point in time will in the same fashion go much higher for the remaining time. In fact, at the moment, we should assume that there are no major pledges outstanding and that we will roughly be at the same pledge total than last year. This might be a little bit conservative here compared with these numbers, but I trust there on the input from the stewardship committee that all the major donors have given by now, and that we should be careful to expect a lot of more. So this budget that we are presenting right now, unless we hear different news, is roughly assuming a level pledge income to last year. And I want to point out the third line here. The third line shows the number of pledge units. And you can see that after the first year of the pandemic, we lost 10 pledge units, and it looks like we're going to lose another 10. So what we are seeing here is that the individuals are more generous. They are accordingly raising their donation and their pledge. However, we are slightly shrinking. Over the pandemic, we lost 10% of our pledge units. So this is one of the interesting points for the future. Is now that when we kickstart the next church year in full programming and everything, are we going to get these people back? Are they disengaged of the pandemic, or do we have lost them for good? Can we make up with new members? Right. So this is why, for me, it's a pretty nice picture in a sense that everybody stepped up. We have increasing pledges on the individual unit. The part that we have to look out is, whether this slight dip in pledging units is something that we can make up for. And it also means we will most likely not reach the pledge target that we have set, which was, I think, at 660,000. And which means also we cannot fund everything we want to. So the budget that I'm going to show you will have a lot of things unfunded. I don't think, I'm not super nervous about it. With this year, even having a level pledge with a slightly shrinking units is a good result. I'm just saying that's basically the facts that we have to deal with. So I also want to mention a few major assumptions and trends. So we assume for the new budget again, that we have in-person service and regular activities, so that All the programs and committee work is fully in action. We only budget a moderate amount of incidental rentals, until this comes back. But we do believe that, we have good reasons to believe that this will be the first regular year since a long time. And because it is a regular year, we also want to budget in a balanced way. So the budget should come down to zero. We don't want to rely on the stabilization fund if there is no real reason why this is an unusual year. Which means in turn that if this year turns out there is another Greek letter coming and everything is shutting down again, then we have a very healthy stabilization fund that we did not plan to tap into. So basically, the stabilization fund should be there if there is more COVID downfall, and the budget that we're going to present at the annual meeting will be balanced to zero. Major changes, two major changes. The cost of living adjustments that the UUI recommend we give our staff is at 5.3%. And, we all know that inflation is super high, higher than this 5.3%. So if we want to continue to pay our staff in what the UUA defines a fair manner, we have to see whether we can make this cost of living adjustment happen for them. Another news is, I cannot speak about much details yet because contracts aren't signed, but we are developing a new usage profile for the Johnson House. And that with new renters involved and old renters. And that will result in a higher rent income, both for the coming year, and there will be another step up in rental income for the financial year 24. So this is good news for us. It's an exciting opportunity. Until contracts are signed, we don't want to speak too publicly about all the parties involved, but stay tuned for more news there. From a financial perspective, you will see we can assume some 20,000-30,000 more this year and another step up next year in a similar amount. So with this, let's look at the income first. So we budget, the budget numbers that we have for the pledges are basically assuming the money in hand right now because of this somewhat unpredictable tail that we have this year. So it is slightly less than last year, but the final numbers for the annual meeting will most likely be more precise. The prior year pledges right now, we assume that was a one-time thing because we have decent pledge fulfillment in the ongoing year. There is no, accumulated shortcomings in pledge fulfillment. So we should assume, Mark Thurber did a long-term analysis about how much money usually comes in late, which is 1.1%. And that's what we assume for this year. We have a few other donations. This is also to do with some credit card fees that partially go to us and stuff like that. So there's good reasons that we have a few $1,000s coming in that we would classify as other donations. We do assume an offering income, which was the last assumed offering income before the pandemic hit. That showed an increase, since Chris arrived, we have raising numbers, so it showed an increase. This is the new rental income. You see $20,000 for now. This has upside. By the annual meeting, there could be up to between $5,000 and $15,000 more. So this is, it's not conservative because the contracts aren't even signed yet, but it is still a lower amount of if the contracts get signed as they stand currently. We do assume that we can do an auction and a musical with a moderate income. So this number is now back from last year. And Mark from the investment team, just told me that he expects the investment and interest income to be at 60,000. And the other operating incomes, we can plan a little bit of a jump there because we are part of this initiative where the UUA gives us some money in order to share our digital content with our digital and other programming content with other communities. And that is something where we expect an income of about $5,000. So that's the income picture. Let's look at the cost picture. Oh, why is this moved? We'll just fix that. Okay. So for the personnel, what I list here is the full amount of the cost of living adjustment according to the UEA, because in the finance committee we felt that the first step we should do is continue our fair payment route. As I said, this would mean there are a few minor staff changes that we have. And this means, cost of living is properly adjusted for all people, including Chris, who in the past has, voluntarily stepped back from raises. Administrative costs, remember that should be actually 50,000 without the mold. But we do have some significant insurance increases and a few computer costs that we cannot avoid. Yeah, so this will still run higher than the 50,000 it was last year without the mold. Simulcast equipment is no longer applicable. Buildings and ground we assume we can do with the same amount. And I want to mention here that this amount means $20,000 in a building fund that pays for HVAC and other major repairs. That was recently increased from 10 to 20,000 when we realized that we hadn't accumulated enough money to deal with the HVAC system. So this 20,000 are included there, which means that in the long term, we will be able to have repairs, without major capital campaign money or something like that. The debts, oops, that's not what I wanted. The debt service, we decided to refinance our debt a little bit. And what happened here is, at the moment, we are in debt only to our own endowment. So we have no external debt anymore. And what we decided to do is, when we paid down all of our debt with the help of the capital campaign money, we actually shortened the runtime of our loan. And we decided to go back to the original runtime of our loan with an adequate, interest rate that we have, which would reduce our debt service per year to about, as you see, 11,500. So this is not changing. As I said, it is the same end date that we had for years. The 16,000 would have actually moved in our end date. And we don't feel we are in a position that we should move in the end date. Utilities, we still expect some more gas price adjustments. Then if we still continue to fund the UUA at 80%, this will raise our expenses there at 40,000. And then we assume that, when the programming starts and people are in person again, that there will be more costs that the committees actually will use. And so the pre-pandemic spending was about 12,000. Pandemic spending, you see about 5,000. So we took 10,000 there. Music committee, in this budget, we assume it's level. I want to talk a little bit what that means in a moment. But if we assume the music committee stays level and the rest stays level, we end up at a number of 858. And I did not separate the income and expense to hide from you the fact that this is not balanced, right? So we still have $5,000 more cost in what I just showed you than we have income. So the reason is, these numbers will still change for the final rental numbers. And once we have them and a few other numbers in more detail, then we have a final number. If we would end up with the numbers that I present here, it would basically mean we cannot fully do the salary adjustments for the staff, right? This is basically nearly everything else is difficult to touch for us right now. So what I want to list here, the things that we cannot do. So for example, the music committee asked for a salary adjustment for the soloists that haven't had a salary adjustment for, quite some time. I don't know, 10 years or something, or at least 5. And we feel from the finance committee, we should prioritize at least that part together with the salary for the staff to make sure that all of our staff, including the soloists, are properly paid. So that is something that we still want to work into the budget and wait on a few final numbers. It also doesn't include what the compensation committee came up with in terms of the benefits adjustment. The benefits that we pay our staff actually have an absolute number as our maximum contribution, and that absolute number hasn't been adjusted for also something like 10, 12 years. So you can imagine with a raise in health cost that this is no longer adequate what we do there. But as I said, this will not be done. Music committee also asked, for organ and instrument maintenance and replacement costs to be increased, is something that is not in this budget. FCB Green Committee has asked, has identified multiple projects over the years, and one of that we all feel would be really great to do is an insulation project, which over the years will pay for itself and save a ton of energy. This is not in the budget. There is some aging computer hardware that in the administrative budget is not on there. And since years we don't fund the UUA to 100%, which is also something that many of us feel bad about. Yeah, so you see there is a lot of things that we cannot do. There is one thing that I want to mention because it could help with some of that. As the capital campaign is wrapping up and people continue to fulfill their pledges, and I encourage really to make sure that you all look into your pledges and your fulfillment and help that committee to wrap up on a high fulfillment rate. There will be most likely some money left on the order of maybe something like 25,000. And if you want to spend this money in the spirit of the campaign, things from that list that I just showed that jump out are, the insulation project and, investment into the instruments, because these are both very much in line with what the capital campaign was for. So there could be a little bit relief on this side. We have not discussed it in all detail. So I bring it up just to say that these two budget items we could maybe do something about, but we have to have a detailed conversation. We cannot use money like that for something like salary or something like that, which is a recurring cost and not a capital cost. So the TLDR of what I just showed is, with all this sad news about things that we would love to finance and can't, the budget still shows a strong financial support of the congregation. As I said before, the people that do pledge, they pledge generous. We can balance our budget without major program, without any major program cuts. And we can do this by paying our staff fairly, right? So it's overall a healthy picture, right? But yes, as I said, a few things we would love to do. And the major factors that really prevented us from having enough growth in the income side from the financial perspective, I mean, now, is attrition in pledge units and the inflation that that drives our salary increases into quite a high area. Yeah, so we can, as I said, there are some of this stuff we can basically use the last money of the capital campaign. But that's mainly the two things that we have to watch. So as I said, we are fundamentally financially healthy, and we really have to watch very closely this next year how the restart is shaping up. How much we are really back to before, how much we can have new growth, new people coming in, how much people that might have disassociated during the pandemic will come back. So this is tough to predict right now in, what is happening now. I do think we can let me switch to speak a little bit about, the future, right? The good part for the future, I find, I talked about it, the Johnson House restructuring of the usage will, have a long-term sustained higher income level for us there. And while the church is only slowly awakening right now, the church is not as crowded as it was before, right? People are coming more sporadically at the moment. what our hope is that with a new church year, with a new kind of summer interrupt and restart, that we can connect to the upward trend that we saw right before the pandemic. And the years before the pandemic, we had a very clear growth path, and we see no reason why we couldn't do that. And if you saw today also in church, the amount of programs we already have, this is why I want to call out the staff here again, right? Is the programming is there. I'm super excited about that. And so I do think we are all somewhat excited about watching the church come out of hibernation strongly after the summer. But what we have to watch out for is, we managed to handle the pandemic so well because we have a steadfast core of members that support us, right? They have shown ample generosity and reliable giving over this difficult years. And, this core is something that we built on. However, as I said before, membership numbers have shrunk, right? At least donating members have shrunk by 10%. And also our donor age over the longer term has increased, right? Not at an alarming level, but significant enough that we have to watch this combination. Are we a church that attracts enough new stewards to maintain all the cost and the programming that we have? Or are we a cost that, is still kind of slowly eating up the substance? This is something, as I said, we have to watch it. I'm not really worried about it right now. The numbers are not dramatic. They are not alarming, but I do think that's what we really have to watch for. So we have to reach out, getting new members in, especially families and young folks that stay longer with us and that can develop into stewards, and also make sure that we give all opportunity for these incoming members to develop into stewards. So I want a big thank you for a lot of people that helped here. Martha Reed, the treasurer that, provided all these numbers. Mark Thurber, who is not only chair of the investment, but together with Martha, he's behind a lot of the projections that we have, a lot of the understanding of our long-term trends. The stewardship committee has, Susan and Bruce and the whole team. They have worked so hard, harder than in past years to make sure that this shortfall that we saw earlier is not proving to be true. We have Sam James, who guides us through all of this in a great fashion. John Howe as a name, together with the whole campaign team. I still can't overstate how much that campaign helped us. And the other members of the finance committee that have not been mentioned above, Brian, Jean, and Mike. And of course, Chris, who is engaged in this like no other minister. But the biggest thank goes to the congregation for the generosity. It's humbling for us in the finance committee to see how time and time again everybody is stepping up and supporting us in the church. As I said, now, we set this up well before the annual meeting so that we can listen, so that we can not only listen but react on ideas. So it took a little bit longer than half an hour, but we have ample time left, and I would open it now for questions. Either you just type them in the chat, or you just raise your hand, and we will have you speak live. Yeah, so Chris is raising his hand.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Stefan, for